Greetings and salutations, Focus Up family. Welcome to the August 24 installment of Right at Center Mutant Politics with Charles X. This show is about politics, global and domestic. We thank you for tuning in with us live on YouTube and various other platforms, or catching up with us on replay. And we ask that you click that like, that subscribe, that bell, and share to support and maintain your Focus Up fix. I am Mr. Nice Guy. Nice isn't the word saint spelled backwards, but the star of this show is Student X. The opinions may be controversial, and you'll hear things that sound like praise of polarizing figures, but we are not endorsing anybody. Our politics are not party-based. We lean on policy here, and we stand on melanation. So without further ado, I pass it off to you, Student X, today. What's going on with you, brother?
Oh, man, just ready to go ahead and have a good little dialogue. Today we were going to do something that we did one time, not live, you know what I mean? And it was such a great dialogue and conversation. And we even had, the precognition of sharing, things that have yet to even, happen, on the show. And sure enough, moments later, we saw those things come to fruition, so I figured today we do more of a freestyle. There's various topics out, in the world right now regarding American politics, and even some geopolitics as well. And I figured that we just, have this open discussion and just, see where it takes us.
That's right. So this is what we're going to be discussing. 2024 election news. ROC, it stands for Right of Center, Mutant Politics, Brother Charles X. And he's, like I said, you are Student X today.
Yeah. And I did that because, a lot of times, I've been being asked, well, what's the mutant all about? And so I like to share with them that, our backgrounds are, we both came up on, comics, and various, cartoons and whatnot, and just that, role playing, games and whatnot, and so, of course, we all know who the X-Men were, and so that was something that always kind of, that I love, especially, dealing with Marvel comics in general, so I put the student in front of me because I'm not Professor X, right? You know what I mean? So, and I consider myself to be a student, there's nothing that, I don't take for granted that, I know everything, because I don't. I'm always eager to learn, and take in new information. And then I'm also eager to share what I've been blessed to know, and what I've been blessed to learn as well, so, that Student X, that's what it's all about. Of course, the dojo, this is one of my workout rooms and whatnot, where I get a little sweat and blood, sweat, and tears in and all that type of good stuff. And, it's funny because, I'm here in the dojo mainly because, my grandchildren live with me, and I basically have to sequester myself, in the area, that they don't necessarily have access to, so every once in a while you might hear some banging on the door, trying to find out, where they call me Jetty, coincidentally, which is a play on, what various, Arab, in the Arab language, they refer to their grandfathers as a Jedi, and I liked it because it was so close to Jedi. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, with Star Wars and whatnot and everything. So I'm Jedi up around here, but you hear them banging on the door, calling my name and whatnot. I love it. Of course, I love them. But in the meantime, instead of me having my office like I used to have, now I just got in the workout area. So this is where we come live, to live from, for the people and whatnot, so.
And it's funny that you say that, because I too am in my dojo. You can see that's my Mark Young dummy right there behind me. So you know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
On
Yes,
the other
sir.
side of it, so that's what's going on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let's talk about some of this stuff that's going on with this 2024 election thing that's going down. It's a lot of buzz going on about it.
Man, it's a lot going on right now, and one of the things that really caught my eye this week, that I want to lead with, is, people, I've been watching or following Alex Jones for a long, long time. He did Prison Planet. He was always bringing in some controversial news and information. I remember he was first talking about, these group of politicians that got together and was, participating in various rituals and whatnot. He snuck into one of their, their meetings and whatnot, was video recording it. And it was just real weird, what these world leaders and politicians were doing. And ever since then, I had tuned into him. Now granted, he's had a fall for grace, more recently, with a lawsuit that was filed against him or whatnot, but regardless, the gentleman has always, had my ear, for a long, long time. And I actually heard the news from a news show that I watch, that has been very eye-opening and shares information that mainstream media just does not cover, called Redacted. And they have brought to my attention that Alex Jones had brought up the fact that, from another gentleman, that in some of the sources that they had, that the Trump was going to be sentenced and in prison at Rikers Island on September 18th, and that, and so it caught my eye. I was like, what, is this real or is this something, that is a fake, but then, I started thinking more about it. I was like, well, clearly someone just tried to kill the guy. Clearly, that's what appears to have happened, either that, or the only flip side could be was somehow, some way, I don't know necessarily know how. And I could see, why people might say it because of the convenience of the timing, that was going on. Could it have been something he staged, or his operative stage, maybe, but, what it appears to be is a genuine assassination attempt. So, that failed. And so now really the last thing that's left, is to throw the guy in jail. And so if this is true, I think it's, it's very, it's very telling. We'll see, what that means for the country, what will happen. I don't know, but Tony Saruga is an investor, a former CIA, NSA contractor and whistleblower. He's a philanthropist. He had broke the news, in regards, to this subject, and apparently, he had some various, sources that's saying that there's already been, arrangements made at Rikers Island in September to receive Trump, as his prisoner. And then the New York Times actually had an article on it too. So, but it's really not being talked about real heavily inside the media. Trump hasn't mentioned it, at all, so I'm just curious to see what happens because, this guy's pretty respected, this Tony Saruga, and for him to have put a hard date out there like that and take such a firm position, is saying that for sure September 18th, Trump's going to be sentenced to a year and be placed in jail, 2 months before the election. He's putting a lot out there, his credibility and everything. So, we're going to see what happens, but it just made me think that, okay, well, A, is this true? And B, we can't really say it's true yet because we haven't got there, but then, what would be some of the ramifications, if that were to be true? What would the response of the people be? How would this be received by Americans in general if this does happen? And what would Trump do? And his supporters, so I'm just throwing it out there. What do you think?
I believe his supporters would rally behind him just like they're rallying behind him with the accusations. If Trump goes to jail, he can still win the presidency and function as the president. After some fashion, he can probably do some type of pardoning. But the bottom line is that would not be an effective way to make him go away. We did talk about me and you. We just shot the breeze, and you convinced me of some things. I wasn't really quite clear how this could play out because my whole thing was this. I was like, look, if there was a great conspiracy to take out Trump, and they controlled the Secret Service, they have access to him at all times to do something simple. They can slip something in his food. There's so many ways that they can actually do this if this was the thing that they needed to be done. Now, you can talk about if they wanted a spectacle. You can talk about what again. I don't know. I'm not saying that it wasn't conspiracy, but again, conspiracies do happen. So when I use that term, that's not a discredit. That's just saying that I don't know. But I lean into thinking that this was a lone person who conspired unto himself, who saw an opportunity, who saw an absolute lapse of security, diligence, and took advantage after fashion. Now that could be wrong, but I'm just saying that if they really wanted to get to Trump, and this was like we're talking about the powers they could be, they have a path to get to him at any point in time in so many ways. That's why I tend not to think that that's the truth.
Yeah. So, like you said, bro, we'll see. The thing that I'm a little skeptical that, outside of, like you were saying, the people rallying and, and support him even more, during the election and voting for him more, to me, that would be the extent of it. Because, I mean, so far, you haven't saw any type of patriots, if you will, rise up, if they believe that he's being unjustly prosecuted, the assassination attempt or whatnot, you're not seeing any additional, people showing up, who love him, trying to help secure him even more, so, like I said, I'm just taking this with a grain of salt, looking to see if this is a reality, and what will happen. But yeah, that definitely, it just caught my eye this month, or this week for sure, in terms of election news.
And when you describe that whole September 18th thing, which is one of my niece's birthdays, but it made me think about how I remember on the internet there was this picture floating around that was supposedly be the finals, the NBA finals, that was literally going to dictate how it's going to play out. And I mean, it was such scuttlebutt and talk about it, how we knew it was fixed. We knew it was blah, 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 all that stuff. And then it didn't come to pass. And it's one of those type of situations where, and honestly, it didn't hold up. It wasn't necessarily as nearly as credible as probably the things you're talking about, because there were things about it that were actually debunkable. But I'm just saying that, it's easy on this side to really embrace the possibility, but then, a lot of that stuff comes crashing down after the fact. So we'll see. I mean, literally, they could adjust it. They could adjust that time frame based on the fact that this information got out. So, that wouldn't even necessarily prove that it wasn't credible, from its origin. But I'm just saying that, I tend to look for simplistic explanations, because it's my understanding that, those tend to be right more than others. But again, these convoluted things do happen in reality. And there are players in big places with great power that puppeteer and manipulate and interact with things. It's just what it is.
Right. So just transferring to another topic, something else that caught my eye, and very much so, is that I for a long time I've shared with people that that I've used various techniques, and sources in terms of to how I do my research, and how I'm steering in certain directions, and different people that I've trusted, through the years, based on their credibility, of reporting on various, situations, and what they said basically coming to pass and whatnot, and one of those individuals that I have a high level of respect for, despite, and this is, it's not very controversial, if you will, in terms of, if the man, but basically, this gentleman was actually convicted, for an online sexting, for supposedly having sexually explicit conversation with a person who they say Ritter thought was a 15-year-old girl. You know what I mean? And the gentleman I'm speaking of is Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter, he had to do 3 years in a Pennsylvania prison, behind the situation. He's always maintained his innocence behind the situation, but he didn't just simply arrive there. This was a gentleman who was, back during the Iraq, weapons, being disarmed and whatnot, and the whole situation, back then, he actually was, someone who was overseeing the disarmament of weapons of mass destruction. At the end of the day, and so the back then it was coincidentally Biden. Biden was in the government, and there was, I'm trying to remember exactly who was the, I want to say it was Clinton at the time, but it's back when you remember you had General Norman Schwarzkopf, going on back then. It was it escapes me in terms of who exactly was president. It'll come to me here in a second. Whoever was the president in '97.
It had to be George Bush. I mean, you're talking about Saddam Hussein, the weapons of mass.
Right. Yeah, we're going back to 97, 98. You know what I mean? Back in that time frame. But basically, the UN Security Council have failed to take action against Iraq for their ongoing, failure to cooperate with inspectors and whatnot. Scott Ritter came in, and he was one of those people, who came in, doing the investigation. At the end of the day, he had broke, with the administration. It was then. That's right. Yeah, that's right. It was during the testimony, September 3rd, 1998. Ritter was asked by then Senator Joe Biden about his position on inspections, which Biden criticized as confrontation-based policy. And Biden questioned if the inspector was trying to appropriate the power to decide when to pull the trigger of military force against Iraq. Biden stated that the Secretary of State will also have to consider the opinions of allies, United Nations Security Council, public opinion, before potentially intervening in Iraq. So to make a long story short, John Kerry was a Republican, or not Republican, but on the Senate at that time. So basically Ritter came out, and gave testimony, saying that this was there was a lot of bogus claims that were being made. In fact, and in fact, so basically he didn't go along with the narrative. At the end of the day, he was not along with the narrative that angered a lot of people, inside the Democrat Party, and then the various warmongers of the time, the neocons and whatnot at that time. And so then, coincidentally later on, this so-called Sting, ended up him in jail. But to make a long story short, Scott Ritter has been sharing a lot of intel and information, as it relates to, what's going on inside Ukraine, what's going on with Russia, and then more recently dealing with, Israel. And he was an animate supporter of Israel prior to all this that started going down recently. And as he started looking into it and whatnot, he became very critical. He basically turned himself into a journalist. He was working with, like RT News, that is a Russian news agency, Sputnik, that also is a Russian news agency, because again, some of his opinions, was not going well with the local networks here, the mainstream media here inside the United States. So again, to make a long story short, the FBI raided his home, this week, and took a lot of electronics and stuff out there and whatnot. And it seemed to be, he wasn't arrested, but it was seeming to be more like a message that was being sent to him. Because if you go online right now and watch a lot of his interviews that he's doing with a host of people and whatnot, he's sharing strategy, in terms of, the thinking of American government, policies and whatnot, like history and whatnot. He's by far one of the greatest voices, in the anti-war movement in particular right now, and someone who wants to see this country change from its, conflict-based economy, into that of a peace-seeking, nation and whatnot. He really wants to see America change, in a positive way, and then bam, he gets hit with this FBI raid, and it was it was something that I guess I wasn't super surprised by, but they seized a lot of his documents and whatnot and everything. Again, not arrested, but right now we have this thing called lawfare that is definitely being acted on people who are critical, to what is happening under, this Democrat-led government, and he is the latest example of that. At the end of the day, literally the same FBI team that raided him was the same one that was charging Trump, on some of the, the Russian conspiracy hoaxes and whatnot and everything. And ultimately, obviously, Trump was found, innocent, of all that, and
I
that,
don't think
a
that's
lot
a
of
proper
what was
character.
done was fabricated.
I don't think that's a proper characterization of how that played out. I think that he was not found guilty of. I mean, you're presumed innocent, so he was already innocent. He was not found guilty of participating with the knowledge, but various people that he was working with actually were convicted for actually participating and having knowledge. So, I mean, it's trumped up as a Russian hoax. I mean, Russia played a part, just like he's saying that Iran or Iraq, whatever, is playing a part in hacking in this stuff now. So I'm just saying that it's basically United States, basically the chickens coming home to roost. The CIA has been messing with other foreign politics and stuff like that, and basically other sovereign nations are playing the playbook. They're trying to seek out their best interests, how they can do it, and they're basically playing by the same rules. So I don't necessarily blame them for that. I expect Russia to do whatever Russia needs to do in Russia's best interest and not be too much concerned about United States interests. And I understand that. To me, that's rational for Russia to be like that.
Right. Well, no doubt. And the thing is that, if you would look at, who the Russians would rather, be in power here in the United States, clearly it would be, the Democrats, clearly, because, and not Trump, because Trump is unpredictable, but these Democrats, they are very predictable. And then the policies that they've engaged in so far has, politically, and economically benefit Russia, to a high degree, so, again, this is, those that are critical of what this administration, has been doing tactically in regards to Ukraine and Russia, and of course Israel, is something that we're going to see how it plays out in this election. But if people were really keeping their eyes on the prize and looking at some of the most important policy decisions that we should be looking at in terms of influence on our vote, what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, and Israel should be central. Is my opinion.
I mean, these things have a drastic impact on us, and they have a drastic impact on the world. I mean, I get the conflict of the fact that they're supposed to be your allies, but again, I'm gonna support my people up to a point. Once they cross certain boundaries, there's certain type of support you're not gonna get from me. And it looks like Israel is habitually, line stepping, crossing that line. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, I mean, you make a very good argument that it might be just a lost cause. I mean, that it's just going to inevitably play out how it's going to play out. And Russia can play the long game, however long Ukraine wants to play this out. In fact, the only thing that's keeping them on life support is what the United States and the others various allies are doing. But I mean, that's what the allies are supposed to do. So I hate to say anything that sounds like a defense of these governments because I don't trust any of them. But, I do understand the concept of someone being your ally and you having their back after fashion. So to me, it's a conflicted situation for me to really lean into something. What I can say is that I'm absolutely 100% against, what's been happening with the Palestinians. I mean, I'm not going to support necessarily what Hamas did to Israel, but I'm definitely going to have a major problem with how Israel's allowed Palestine to fall under the feet of attacking and dealing with Hamas.
Yeah, well, I mean, dealing with that issue right there, I can't blame Hamas for wanting to be free of that oppression they've been dealing with, for many, many, many years now. And then also you got to take into account that a lot of these nations, even other Arab Muslim nations, had not had this, the plight of the Palestinian people, high on their radar and on their list. So they were pretty much going at it alone. And now just through that October 7th attack, they have shifted, the position of these governments who were trying to be neutral, and just, standing by, letting various atrocities, happen. Now they have forced their hands in certain ways to now be, and then play a more active role, and at the very least have to address their populations that's asking, their governments, why are you, not standing with the Palestinian people? You know what I mean? So it it was very, it was a very, very, strong military action that Hamas launched. You know what I mean? Granted, anytime there's a loss of life and people getting harmed, especially innocent civilians, I don't like it. You know what I mean? But then when you have your back against the wall as a people, and you're dealing with these atrocities like the rapes that we're talking about right now, the sexual assaults and whatnot, that's been happening even prior to October 7th and whatnot. The people, they want to be free. You know what I mean? And then the fact that, many of them are Muslim, as well as that, the thing is that when you fear, when you're a Muslim, it's like, that is, the philosophy, that's being taught to them is one resisting evil, and wickedness, and fighting, as opposed to other religions, which might, tell, people just to turn the other cheek, and not really, and just let the cards fall how they fall type of deal. It's how it's been presented. So these people, are not going to stand by for, ever, until they're free. You know what I'm saying? So the thing is that, now Hamas has forced that dialogue, and forced the world to deal with this issue one way or another, and here we are.
Well, be careful what you pay for, or what you ask for. So I'm just saying that if you launch a war, even if you feel justified, what you need to be thinking about is the profit, the pros versus the cons, the fallout versus the choices. So I'm just saying that it's not a free pass for what Israel's doing, but you're also giving fuel to a lot of these things that have played out. So I think for the most part, Palestine has the world's sympathy, rightfully so. But I do respect Israel as a sovereign nation. I understand the concept of people feel like, hey, they took it from there. I mean, look, all these nations have been taken. I mean, we reside on a nation that's been taken. But you and I, we have we have our real estate. It is what it is. I mean, there should be sympathy and compassion to those who have been oppressed, who has been moved off, whatever, turf slid, however you want to look at it. But I mean, at the end of the day, human beings need to figure out a solution that works for everybody on some type of level. It's not just the either or type situation when you're dealing with humanity, because it's not okay for it to just only be all of them left or all of those people left. It needs to be some type of functional compromise that where both of y'all figure out some way to functionally live, whether that's possible or not. I mean, of course, I think it's possible. Whether it's going to happen or not, that's a whole nother different discussion. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, human beings need to be compassionate to other human beings.
Yeah, we're going to find out, because there's a lot of pressure, obviously on Israel now. They've had they're losing a lot of money. They're a lot of the population is starting to leave that country. So they could be strategically defeated, without necessarily being wiped out, and eliminated, physically, just through, what's taking place, and we're going to see there's a lot of headwinds that are taking place. And, if going back to American politics, I feel like to a degree, that I'm not sure we would see much difference in terms of how Israel is being, handled, from Kamala or Trump, but, we'll see. The one thing I can say about Trump is that, he did have a lot of people, on during his administration. It was relatively, for the most part, there's definitely was some military actions taking place, but, it was a not as much as what we're seeing now, to say the least. It was relatively peaceful, underneath his regime. Now, granted, he did fund then Saudi Arabia to actually attack Yemen, who are the Houthis, that we are seeing today. But since then, it's a trip that when Trump was in president, just those 4 short years ago, it's a whole different world now, based on how the Democrats have ruled. Now, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, man, they are lockstep in sync with each other. You know, what I mean, now Saudi Arabia, has peace with Iran. You know, what I mean, thus which has stopped now the attacks against Yemen. You know what I mean? So, again, Trump used them, in his administration to attack Yemen. I don't see that happening today. The BRICS nations in general, are getting stronger and creating a framework to where it is, likely to rival the dollar, and be replaced, and maybe have some type of mechanism, to replace the dollar as the global currency. You know what I mean? Right now, China and Russia, over 90% of their trade is being done amongst each other using their own currencies and no longer the dollar. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a whole different world that if Trump were to be president, that he's going to inherit this time around. And so, it's going to be real curious, to see again, who wins. And if Trump does win, how he's going to maneuver, in this new world, so.
I think we're cherry picking a lot of things that were actually going on. I mean, really, the big thing that happened during Trump's, campaign, and I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just talking about the state of the world. COVID had a drastic, big, large impact on a lot of stuff. So you're talking about, is not just the function of the desk. You're talking about production. You're talking about, income versus production. I mean, there were a lot of extenuating factors. That's why when he always tries to talk about his best parts, he wants to try to push them as far away from the post-COVID parts, because COVID was a big impact, and it didn't just impact us, it impacted the world. So I mean, it kind of put everybody on somewhat of a chill pill after a fashion. So I'm just saying that I think that it's probably giving him way more credit than he deserves.
Yeah, I mean, but COVID definitely, impacted things because, the way the economy was rolling pre-COVID, for Trump, I mean, he was definitely on his way to a second term, no doubt about it, and then of course, the COVID happened and whatnot, and then these lockdowns came in place, and that, honestly, we became the foundation ultimately on how the Democrats stole that election. You know what I mean? When we start dealing with those mail-in ballots and whatnot, the election integrity here in the United States, took a downturn, and then the powers that be, which we refer to as the deep state, was able to slide, to change some realities.
Election integrity. So you're talking about a method and a means for people to vote. I mean, it's one thing to say that, those people didn't vote, that the people didn't vote. It's a whole nother thing to saying that, look, technically this this method wasn't supposed to use to the extent that it was used, even though it's basically been a method that's been used for a very, very, very long time, even by Donald Trump. I'm just saying that, the biggest problem with COVID was not just the fact that COVID would hit us. I would argue that the impact of COVID was exacerbated by his lack of preparation for that. I felt like he leaned way more into building up the military and then actually decommissioning the viral, task force and stuff that were put in place, because we previously had been dealing with sort of like these I forgot what they call the outbreak. What would you call, what's the term that we call that era? It was the bottom line. It's a term for when a disease is everywhere and stuff like that. Bottom line is we had dealt with that after pandemic. Thank you. That was the word that I was looking for. We had dealt with pandemics after a fashion, and an actual pandemic response force was actually created. And it was sort of like peacetime. It wasn't really needed. That was the logic that he used, and it wasn't a terrible decision. It wasn't terrible from a logic standpoint based on gambling that, we weren't going to have some type of pandemic. But the fact of the matter is we did. And I really believe that impacted how we were able to respond to it. And then you had all these conflicting issues about how to deal with it. Some people just not accepting. It's one thing to be terrified of a virus or not one. I get that. I get that. Black people, you ain't got to explain that to black people. There's a lot of black people that have problems with with immunizations and stuff like that for good reason. But I'm just saying that when you're talking about at least just covering up, I mean, that became like a big political thing about the fact that someone could at least keep 6 feet from you or whatever. And I'm just saying that was not a responsible way to deal with a life-threatening pandemic that wasn't just killing people here, but was killing people all over the world. So I'm just saying that, he played a part in that. My father always talks about the great economy that he helped build up. And again, he inherited a great handoff from the presidency before him. But, he had things going well after a fashion, but his lack of taking this sort of like one thing down and hesitancy to deal with this situation, I think that exacerbated and created to the extent that it manifested how it did. I mean, he did some good things. Don't get me wrong. He at some point he put on the big boy pants and he did some things. He pushed the immunization stuff around. You know what I'm saying? He did some things. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not gonna say that he didn't do nothing about it. I'm just saying that the politics got really nasty and it really impacted how America was really to deal with that situation.
Yeah, the latter point you made, that's what I was the most disappointed with him in. But again, we have to categorize, what really happened here. At the end of the day, and what happened was it wasn't Trump that had policies that ill impacted us. What happened was the global economic community came into play, and then a decision was made, by these Western nations in particular to shut down the economy, to lock everybody down, instead of, and I was saying this right from the beginning, is that, okay, look, if we're worried about, immunity, and those that who are will be more fragile in this type of environment and more at risk, then what we should do is take the most vulnerable of us and have them locked down, and sequestered and taken care of, and allow the economy to keep on trucking and keep on moving. But instead, what the politicians did, and this was not Trump, he was against this from the beginning. They closed down churches. They were mandating people be in certain proximities with one another. Businesses were shut down, and people were told literally by coercion and with penalty that you could not, have your business open. I remember these times. Those weren't Trump policies.
Because
these were being
dying.
pushed primarily by Democrats in particular and various politicians and economics, that really pushed, this policy at the end of the day. And Trump was trying to combat it, from the beginning, and eventually he just ended up capitulating to a certain degree because it was made very clear that that they wanted some sort of money-making revenue to take place, behind this. They didn't want to waste, this wonderful opportunity to get paid.
So
and what the decision was made was, okay, we're going to make some vaccine mandates, make people be mandatory, have to take a vaccine, and we're going to also make it to where the vaccine makers, will not have any liability for any harm that their product might cause on the people. You know what I mean? A different, testing.
Why did he capitulate? If you say he capitulated, why would he capitulate?
Well, because there was a lot of pressure on them, and the way the media was hammering them and whatnot and everything, then it just made it. It was being
because it wouldn't have happened if he wouldn't have done it, right?
No. If he wouldn't have capitulated, then there would have been, a better. We would be in a better place right now. Honestly, but instead, when he capitulated, like I said, now we made it to where millions and millions of people were coerced to take something they did not want to take at the end of the day, only to come find out that it wasn't helping them anyway. The whole narrative changed to, at first the narrative was these vaccines were going to protect you. Then it changed from, okay, it's not going to necessarily protect you, but it's going to make you not get as sick. You know what I'm saying? To where now, when the facts came out, post, this pandemic, the vaccine, was causing some people harm and not benefiting you at all. At the end of the day,
so I reject that interpretation of the empirical evidence because they actually have things that they can calculate. When you're talking about, the impact of society and stuff like that, as far as these diseases, as far as, immunizations or whatever, they have sort of like statistics that can process how effective a thing has been done. And the fact of the matter is, I remember when they first implemented all these sort of like protocols, and people were wearing masks, 6 feet, and all this stuff like that, and everybody was talking stuff like that. I remember someone posting like, "But I ain't had a cold for like 6 months." I mean, and I'm just saying that these policies actually had an impact, and I get it.
A negative impact.
It had a positive impact. I understand that in some places like Texas, where everybody was spread out, Texas didn't necessarily need. Florida maybe didn't necessarily need what New York absolutely needed. What dense populations, because it was a fact that people were actually overrunning these hospitals and stuff like that. So these policies, these things, and then you're talking about supplies they didn't have, because again, that was that whole pandemic response task force that Trump basically disbanded. So I'm just saying that these were weapons that would have been able to be used to sort of like compartmentalize this and keep this control after fashion. So it didn't necessarily have to get to where it got. But again, it's kind of spilled milk. But I mean, if you want to color it how you want to color it about the vaccine, I reject that, because I understand the science of what it did. It did have an impact. It did have actually successful stuff. I understand that some people had an adverse response to it. It's just like my analogy. I always say that I remember a friend of mine told me that he was in a car accident and he didn't wear a seatbelt. And because he didn't wear a seatbelt, he got ejected out of the car, and it saved his life because the car got destroyed. And I'll say that, look, check this out. When you have this option and this option will have these results and these deaths, and this option will have these results and these deaths, and one of those numbers will be greater. So you may substitute. So I understand that some people did have an adverse reaction to the vaccine, but by and large numbers did not. So I'm just saying that empirically, it did not support that. So I'm just saying we can agree to disagree on that, but I'm just telling you, we're putting this out on the internet. I can't just be silent on that. I'm just telling you that immunization, viral, this technology, this science has been along for a very long time. And I understand that they're using the mRNAs, and that was more recent. But literally, the difference was that instead of using the whole version of the virus, just the proteins. That's what it was. This technology had been employed for years before it even came to COVID. So I'm just saying that, do your research, but I'm just telling you the science does not bear what people are saying on that end. So I'm just saying.
But I'm saying there's plenty of science that's supporting the position that I'm taking right now. That what we know for a fact is that people that were ill impacted by COVID were those who suffer from 4 or more comorbidities, meaning that they were already sick. They already had, compromised immune systems and whatnot. Those were the individuals that were being ill impacted, at the end of the day, which, made sense from the beginning, because I was one of those individuals that, bro, I didn't wear a mask. I didn't do none of those protocols at all. And I did get what I think was, the COVID one time. I didn't lose my taste and all that type of stuff like that. But I did have a week where I was, not doing well and whatnot, but obviously I didn't, pass away or anything like that. And this obviously was something, versus nothing.
But
it came out of nowhere. But again, what we had was policies supported by Democrats.
You may have very well passed that on to people that didn't have the nice response that you did. That was the dangerous thing. The reason why I put on the mask, the same reason why they put a sneeze guard at the buffet. I'm just saying that there's a certain fundamental respect that it just wasn't putting you out there to just do this because again, it's not a function of just how you react to it. You may be a carrier to pass it off to someone who will have a way worse reaction. I was concerned about my parents, my older parents. So that was my concern. My concern was not passing something to them. So that's what I'm saying. It wasn't just an issue of how I'd probably be all right from it. You know what I'm saying? Because, I actually did got it. I did have a very bad reaction to it. But I'm just saying that, it's my concern was my family being safe. And, my parents got vaccinated. They are fine. They're fine.
Yeah. To each their own. But, I wasn't about not even thinking about, giving into that government coercion and whatnot, got taken the vaccine. That again, there was no going to be no liability by the maker and whatnot. Something that was pushed on the people, and that was very much experimental. And there definitely has been, without doubt, adverse effects on some, not everyone. For sure. But again, wherever people getting the protection, that they originally were told that they were going to get, that was not what was taking place at all. And it definitely, had some other type of consequences, that, maybe didn't result in people getting sick, But again, my point of bringing it up was this was an example of not President Trump policy, but Democrat policies who took a draconian approach to say that we're going to make you put something in your body, whether you want it or not, in order for you to even be able to support your family and support your well-being, and that's something that, again, from a policy perspective, I cannot sign on to, ever.
Hey, brother, I don't know how old you are, but when I was young, in order for us to go to school, we had to take, whatever. That's what it was. Now, you may have homeschooled your people, and that's that might have been a free pass for. I know the Floyd X did that for sure, but I'm just saying that this has been along for a while. As far as those type of regulations, there are regulations on the fact that you have to wear a seatbelt. There's all type of regulations in your car that make it safer. There's regulations.
Right. You're not comparing apples to apples. You know what I'm saying? Again, even with the immunizations we did as children, the bottom line was, if you want to go into that school, then there's certain vaccines that you had to have, but your parents had the choice of absolutely homeschooling you if that's what they wanted to do, and not put you inside that school system, and you wasn't sequestered from the rest of society and whatnot. As far as wearing seatbelts, again, a seatbelt, that's something that is not evasive, you know what I'm saying? And then something that is obvious and makes a lot of sense to where if you can help, prevent, your
people
death.
Don't like it. Some people don't. Hey, some people don't like wearing helmets. Some people ride motorcycles.
Yeah, and to a degree, they should have a right to do it if they do it or not. But at the same token, for those that have to go clean up the mess after, you know what I'm saying? In the case of, event and whatnot, sometimes there are some type of regulations that, I'm not going to be complaining about as much.
And the other participants of that accident traumatizing them for the rest of their lives.
Exactly. You know what I mean? But like I said, in the case of where we have something evasive that, again, was experimental, something that, was rushed along, to be approved, and then on top of that, the companies not, being exonerated from taking any liability, right? It was simple for me. There was no way in hell I was going to go that direction. But anyone that was trying to argue the opposite point, was an enemy to me. At the end of the day, And I'll never forget the Democrats, in particular, for that type of position, and the position that they took, which virtually destroy our economy. Completely destroy our economy, and we're still looking at we still have adverse effects, from that moment, and again, I'm just me personally.
I care about lives more than economy. I mean, to me, whenever I hear discussion about money versus policy, to me, I don't see how that's not selling out.
What you mean?
I mean, when you sit there and say that, look, the reason why I rock with this person's policies is because I'm worried about my financial bottom line. If that's the thing that's most important to you, whereas as opposed to things that might create more justice, and I'm not saying one is going to do the other. I'm just talking about theoretically. I'm just saying that if that's what it comes down to, you as far as the world being a better place or you having more money in your pocket, to me, that sounds like selling.
Now, to me, where I lay, my hat is, freedom, justice, and equality. That's where I lay my hat at. That's why I want to see not only for Americans, but for indeed the world. That's why I don't like the position that our government has taken to where if we really study and understand this economy, that we deal with here in America, is really, based on conflict. It's based on creating conflict, harming others, selling weapons to other people or whatnot. That's what this economy is based on. It's not based on making peace, at the end of the day, and that's why I want to see change, in regards to our politics. And that's why when I look at Kamala Harris and when I look at Trump, I'm not seeing that, you know what I mean, coming from their policies and their positions, at all. You know what I mean? But now I also want to see, myself and others had an opportunity to do well if we choose to. You know what I mean? Now, granted, if people don't want to work hard, if they don't want to, prepare themselves, and do things that would encourage, and raise the odds and statistics of having a good life, then that's on that person. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, you know what I mean? But if you want to, do well here in this country, I like to see policies, that would help you, be able to achieve that, you know what I mean, at the end of the day. You know what I mean? That's what I like to see.
I support that wholeheartedly. I want everybody to win. I want people to win. I don't root for just for me. I root for me and mine. I root for others. And again, even if it's people that don't like me, even if it's people that hate me, I'm not the criteria of whether your family deserves to have shelter, love, whatever, and stuff like that. You don't need to be friends with me. The most important thing is for your family to be taken care of. So that's what I'm saying. I root for everybody. So I embrace completely what you just said. And I'm just saying that some of these policies that I would argue that have been put out are policies that will help some other people participate in that and get some of that vision, to get some of that sort of like what they call it, the American dream, that they just wouldn't have access to otherwise. Because I brought up on the other show, I'm not going to rehash it here, but I am in a home right now taking advantage of one of those first-time home buyer, programs. And I mean, it was hellacious to qualify. It was hellacious to go through. When I'm telling you that I had to go through this, that, and the other stuff, most people wouldn't have the resources or the good fortune to take advantage of how I did. But suffice it to say, the point is that I am living in my situation, having been benefited from it. And I'm just saying that I would rather see people in that type of a situation as opposed to situations where, they're paying more than what I'm paying monthly and they're not building equity. It's not always a slam dunk to have a house situation that's better than a rent situation. It depends. But when you crunch the numbers and it makes sense, then it's a good thing.
Yeah, no doubt. You know what I mean? No doubt. And I'm like you. Policies that help and benefit people. You know what I mean? In general, that's a good thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing, unless, like I say, you have to look at the totality of the picture. You know what I mean? So if we're gonna, create, a system to where people are being rewarded for doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, I don't particularly like that. You know what I mean? But if there's some things that could be implemented, and then now we can hold people accountable that receive such a benefit. Like, for example, if someone's going to get like some sort of stipend, to go to a college, right? You shouldn't be there, and receive that stipend if you're not applying yourself and you're not, holding a certain GPA, right? Even when we had affirmative action back in the day, you couldn't just go to college and just not do anything. Now, granted, unfortunately, during that particular policy, we saw people not do as well as others, but then we had some of us that did benefit and take advantage of the situation and did very well. Receiving those type of benefits and whatnot and everything, so, again, so I'm not for, just handing out money just to be handing out money, and resources.
You make a great point, because it's like, I don't even know if I want to put this on the internet, but I mean, it's like, when I hear a lot of, and I don't want to say just, it's not necessarily just Republicans, but it just, when I hear like, a lot of people complaining about welfare and stuff like that, I feel like, you guys don't know the half. There's this whole nother element that should really infuriate you, that really should make you upset, would be the fact that a lot of these gangbangers and stuff be on like GR. So, what I'm saying? They're like literally just, they ain't doing nothing but gangbanging, selling whatever, and they're getting GR. They're getting a monthly check. They're basically getting welfare, and that's funding their re-ups and all this other stuff. And you know what I'm saying? It's not just a function of the fact that, someone who's on welfare and they're using their money to do their nails or their hair or buy alcohol or something that people feel like you shouldn't be using that assistance for. I'm talking about a whole nother level where it's a movement of people that are using this stuff for nefarious things, way more nefarious than the stuff that you've been complaining about. So I'm just saying that it goes without saying, if you're going to give money to somebody, there needs to be accountability. Even during this whole COVID situation, they had those loans and stuff like that, those
Right.
PPL or whatever, that people got in trouble for because they were doing it, and then lobsters and shrimps and just doing whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, it goes without saying, when you try to help and you try to do good things, there are going to be criminals and there are going to be bad people that are going to reach for those funds, and they're going to muddy the water, and they're going to make you probably feel some way about even having those funds existing. But again, the most important thing to me is that when you're giving these funds to these, to this type of cause, is that at least money is getting to that cause. But yeah, you need to
ensure accountability.
Yeah, but you need to
And
have
we see that with
accountability.
foreign policy and spending too. Look at a lot of the resources that were sent out there to Ukraine, and weapons, to where we see some of those weapons turn up on the black market in Mexico, helping the cartels. So it definitely goes both ways in terms of tracking resources and making sure they're being properly allocated. And a lot of times, what these individuals do is that they'll leave these blatant openings, if you will, just so there could be a level of, shall we say, laundering, taking place, and corruption, taking place and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And that's something that we got to just shut down. That's why I'm not really, I don't believe in government, at all. And that's why I like to see business, owners, and businessmen and women, more in control, of, how things operate with government, because they have a greater sense of accountability, tracking resources, allocation of funds, and getting the biggest bang for the buck. Successful businessmen and women.
I mean, if they have their morality together. I mean, to me,
Sure.
it comes down to the government as well. The greatest government in the world will still fall apart if you have a criminal,
No
implementing
doubt about it.
it doesn't matter. So whether it's business, whether it's government, all of this is the buck's always going to stop back with the people in power that are actually implementing these policies. So that's why, it gets messy. That's why I do agree. Business needs allowed to be able to do business. But when business is demonstrating to you that they're doing extra, that they're gouging, then there has to be some type of accountability. So I'm just saying that I think that you can both step away and still look over the shoulder, because again, we have regulations for all type of business practices for this very reason, to oversee, to make sure that crayons don't have lead in them. There's like a little number on your crayon box. If you buy your crayon box overseas, it might not have that number on them. It might have lead in them. So I'm just saying that a lot of these rules are for purposes, but I understand, like you say, people take advantage of this stuff.
But like I said, there's also hypocrisy, because, as you mentioned, the crayons, I take you to none other than our food supply, and we can see all the toxins and ingredients, that are ill impacting the people, causing cancer, causing some of the diseases we have. And then, it's not a big leap to insinuate that this is being allowed so that, the pharmaceutical industry, could make their money, and make their profits that they're making, and then no one's talking about regulating those industries and whatnot, So, like I said, if it's, there's a lot of hypocrisy and there's a lot of political maneuvering, when it comes to, some of these things that are being done. And so that's why I always look at it real closely, and in particular, this Kamala, economic policy that's talking about, our food supply, and price gouging and this and that of the nature.
And the flip side of that interpretation of events is that, another thing is that some people might consider it the freedom to run their business how they want to, because if they use these toxins and use these chemicals, it brings down their bottom line because it preserves the stuff and makes it last. So I'm just saying everything is not necessarily about the end game as far as the pharmaceutical end game. It's just that when you have free market, whatever, I'm just saying that business people, we talked about Famous Amos, when they took over the cookies, they made tweaks to the recipe because they're trying to basically, they're working on
Make
that
more
bottom
money.
line, that money. So,
Right.
and that will create a conflict as far as, the end product and healthy and stuff like that. So I'm just saying that you're right. The pharmaceutical dynamic, that's real. It's real. There's a lot of people make a whole lot of money, just like a lot of people make a lot of money off of private prisons. You know what I'm saying? People make money off of people either being in jail or people being sick. That's just the reality. You know what I'm saying? So and when that's the case, when what you do gives you some type of money, absolute power corrupts absolutely. When you talked about giving aid to these countries, that's just like giving them food. You can send a whole bunch of food to a country, but now if one person's controlling who gets it, whatever, now you basically creating a warlord over that situation.
Straight
So I'm
up.
just saying that, that's why it's not enough just to give. You got to make sure what you give gets to where it needs to go.
Straight up, my brother. Well, from my end, brother, I really don't have too much more. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about some things, but on a future show, what I like to do is to explore something that you sent to me earlier, which is now all of a sudden out the blue, all these accolades, and accomplishments that Kamala Harris has, is being rumored to have done,
Or
what I
actually
mean, for
did.
the benefit, of the people and whatnot. And it was all new news to me, and it's something even herself she hasn't promoted or her supporters haven't supported, but conveniently right now, this information, is coming to the surface. So, I'm gonna take a deeper dive into the information, and analyze it myself, and then
I'll drop
I
it in
think
the
we should come
comments.
back and talk about that.
I'll drop it in the comments in this show. So that's for sure. After the show, I'll put it in the comments. But I just want to say that my degree is in business and marketing, and the reason why I did that because I felt that everything came down to business, everything came down to marketing, even though I'm poor. But still, I'm just saying that it's marketing. Your knowledge of what somebody's doing or what they're whatever you got to get that information out there. So I'm not saying what she didn't do or what she did do or didn't do, but I will understand or acknowledge that how it's been promoted or put out there will have an impact of your ability to consume it. But anyways, go ahead, do your work, brother. You are diligent, intelligent. I commend you for your studying and just sincerity and integrity, and you'll go over that information and we'll talk about it and visit another day.
For sure, my brother, for sure.
All right, then. Peace
All
out.
right.
Thank you very much.
Salute to you, brother.
Thank you guys for participating in our conversation. It's a little freestyle mutant politics, but like, share, and subscribe. We'll normally put this in here when we don't have a spin that back, and ultimately we're gonna open up a window that's not dependent upon that, but this is what you'll have. So thanks a lot.